When the sheriff's deputies hauled away HOA President Denise Marple in her polka-dot swim cap, she was still yelling that my pool was, quote, community property, unquote. The absurd part? She was dripping wet, wearing my robe, and her minivan was full of stolen patio furniture with my initials burned into it. 2 months earlier, I, Evan Lasker, a quiet accountant who just wanted to swim laps in peace, moved into Cedar Hollow, a neighborhood where the HOA newsletter was thicker than the phone book. Denise Marple, the self-proclaimed guardian of property values, took one look at my newly resurfaced backyard pool and decided it, quote, didn't belong to just me, unquote. My first encounter with Denise happened on a perfectly normal Tuesday morning. I was measuring chemicals for the pool when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. There stood a woman in her early 50s wearing what I can only describe as an HOA uniform consisting of pressed khakis, a polo shirt with Cedar Hollow embroidered on it, and a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to her hand. "Good morning," she said in a tone that suggested it was anything but good. "I'm Denise Marple, president of the Cedar Hollow Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your pool." I introduced myself and asked what exactly needed discussing since I'd already submitted all the required paperwork when I moved in. She tapped her clipboard with obvious impatience. "Mr. Lasker, all pools in Cedar Hollow must be registered for community use. It's in subsection 12.4 of our bylaws. I told her I'd read the bylaws thoroughly and found no such requirement. Private. Pools remained private property." Her smile tightened into something that resembled a crack in concrete. "Perhaps you need to read more carefully. I'll have a copy delivered to your door." The next morning at 6 a.m. sharp, my doorbell rang, not once, but 15 times in rapid succession. Through the peephole, I saw Denise standing there with a stack of papers thick enough to use as a doorstop. "These are the updated bylaws," she announced when I opened the door. "Section 12.44 is highlighted for your convenience." I flipped to the section sheet marked. Sure enough, there was a paragraph about pool sharing, but the paper was clearly different from the rest of the document. Newer, whiter, and the font didn't quite match. "This page was added after the original printing," I observed. She shifted uncomfortably. "The board voted on these amendments last month. I asked for the meeting minutes." She claimed they were being transcribed. I asked for the vote record. She said it was unanimous. I asked which board members were present. She suddenly remembered an urgent appointment. Over the next 2 weeks, the harassment escalated. I'd wake up to find violation notices taped to my door. Pool water too blue. Violation. Pool equipment humming. After 8 p.m. violation. Unauthorized swimming detected at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. Violation. The notices became increasingly bizarre. One claimed I was using excessive water that belonged to the HOA irrigation system. Another stated that my pool's reflection was creating a nuisance glare for passing vehicles despite my backyard being completely fenced and invisible from the street. Then came the surveillance. I started noticing Denise on her roof with binoculars every time I had guests over. She'd photograph everyone who entered my backyard, claiming she needed to document unauthorized community pool usage. My neighbor, Greg Patterson, stopped by one evening with a warning. "Watch yourself with Denise," he said quietly. Last year, she tried to claim the Johnson's gazebo was built on HOA common ground. They had to hire a surveyor to prove her wrong. I asked what happened to the Johnsons. Greg's expression darkened. They moved, said it wasn't worth the constant battles. But I wasn't the type to be bullied. I installed security cameras around my property, making sure they captured not just my yard, but also anyone attempting to surveil it from neighboring properties. The footage I collected over the next week was golden. Denise climbing a ladder at 5 a.m. to peer over my fence. Denise attempting to measure my water meter while I was at work. Denise instructing the HOA landscaping crew to trim branches specifically to create sightlines into my backyard. 3 weeks into this nonsense, I decided to throw a small barbecue for some work colleagues. Nothing fancy, just 8 people enjoying a Saturday afternoon. Naturally, Denise appeared at my gate within minutes of the first guest arriving. "This gathering exceeds the approved occupancy for a private pool," she announced, waving yet another freshly printed notice. I calmly informed her that no such restriction existed and that she was trespassing on my property. She responded by taking photos of all my guests, claiming she needed evidence for the HOA board. One of my colleagues, who happened to be a paralegal, asked Denise for her legal authority to photograph people on private property. Denise sputtered something about community standards and retreated, but not before promising this wasn't over. She was right about that. The following Monday, I received a certified letter stating that the HOA was conducting an emergency audit of all pools in the neighborhood for safety compliance. My pool was scheduled for inspection that Thursday at 2 p.m. I took the day off, work, and waited with my security cameras recording. At exactly 2 p.m., Denise arrived with 3 men in work uniforms and a truck labeled Cedar Hollow Maintenance. "We're here for the mandatory inspection," she announced triumphantly. I asked for their certification as pool inspectors. The men looked confused. One of them whispered to Denise that they were just the landscaping crew. She silenced him with a glare. When I refused them entry without proper credentials, Denise produced another document. This one claimed I had signed an agreement allowing HOA access for inspections. The signature on it looked nothing like mine. I told them to leave immediately, or I would call the police. Denise smirked and said she'd be back with proper authority. 2 days later, I came home from work to find my worst nightmare. The gate to my backyard was open, and I could hear the sound of pumps running. I rushed back to find the same maintenance crew actively draining my pool while Denise supervised with obvious satisfaction. "What are you doing?" I shouted. She held up yet another paper. "Emergency health and safety inspection. We found your pool to be in violation of county codes. It must be drained and inspected." I immediately called 911. While waiting for the police, I used my phone to call the county health department. The confused clerk confirmed they had issued no such order and had no record of any complaint about my pool. When the police arrived, Denise tried to show them her paperwork. The officer examined the supposed county order and immediately recognized it as fraudulent. The county seal was photocopied and pixelated. The signature line contained a name that didn't match any county employee. "Ma'am," the officer said slowly, "forging government documents is a felony." Denise's face went pale. She stammered that there must be some misunderstanding, that she was just trying to enforce HOA rules. The officer was unimpressed and told the maintenance crew to stop draining the pool immediately. But the damage was done. Half my pool water was gone and the pump equipment had been tampered with. I now had grounds for both criminal and civil action. My lawyer, Michael Brennan, could barely contain his excitement when I showed him the evidence. "Forged signatures, fraudulent government documents, trespassing, destruction of property," he said, shaking his head. "This isn't just HOA overreach. This is criminal fraud." We started with a formal complaint to the county prosecutor's office. They were particularly interested in the forged county health department order. Impersonating a government agency, it turned out, was something they took very seriously. Meanwhile, we also filed a complaint with the State Real Estate Commission. HOAs in our state are governed by strict regulations, and Denise had violated almost all of them. The investigation that followed was thorough and eye-opening. The prosecutor's office subpoenaed the HOA's financial records, and what they found was staggering. Denise had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, disguising them as community improvements. The new plants around her house paid for with HOA dues. The professional landscape lighting that only illuminated her property, also HOA funded. But the real bombshell came when they discovered she'd been attempting to expand HOA control over private property throughout the neighborhood. There were forged easement documents, fabricated liens, and even attempts to claim portions of homeowners' lots as common areas. My pool situation was just the tip of the iceberg. She'd apparently decided that my corner lot, with its larger-than-average backyard, would make a perfect community amenity if she could just find a way to seize it. The state investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Delgado, interviewed me for 3 hours about my experiences. She showed me documents Denise had prepared but not yet filed, including a claim that my property encroached on HOA land and that my pool had been illegally built on a common area. The survey records clearly show this is false, Patricia said. But if you hadn't fought back, she might have gotten away with filing these claims. Many homeowners don't have the resources to fight lengthy legal battles. The criminal case moved quickly once the prosecutor realized the scope of Denise's activities. She was charged with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and misuse of fiduciary duty. Each forged document was a separate count. Each misappropriated HOA payment was another. The HOA board held an emergency meeting to address the crisis. I attended along with about 60 other homeowners who had all been victims of Denise's schemes in one way or another. The stories that came out were incredible. One family had been told their driveway exceeded width regulations and needed to be torn up. Another had been fined thousands of dollars for grass that was supposedly 1, 4, and 2 tall. The board voted unanimously to remove Denise from her position and to cooperate fully with all investigations. They also voted to hire an independent auditor to review all HOA decisions made during her tenure. As the criminal case proceeded, Denise's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested in going easy. The forged government documents had crossed a line that couldn't be overlooked. The civil lawsuit I filed was running parallel to the criminal case. We sued for trespassing, destruction of property, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. My security camera footage was particularly damning, showing Denise's repeated attempts to surveil and access my property illegally. During the discovery phase, we learned even more disturbing details. Denise had created fake email accounts to send herself complaints about various homeowners, then used these complaints to justify her actions. She'd been planning to gradually take control of multiple properties through a combination of fraudulent liens and forged documents. Her financial situation unraveled quickly. Legal fees for both the criminal defense and civil lawsuits drained her savings. The HOA sued her to recover the misappropriated funds. Other homeowners filed their own lawsuits. Soon she was facing financial ruin. The criminal trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming, and her lawyer's attempts to paint her as an overzealous but well-meaning HOA president fell flat. The jury found her guilty on all counts. The judge, clearly disgusted by the abuse of power, didn't hold back during sentencing. Denise received 2 years in prison, 3 years of probation, and was ordered to pay $200,000 in restitution. She stood there in shocked silence as the bailiff prepared to take her into custody. But that wasn't the end of the story. To pay her legal bills and restitution, Denise was forced to liquidate her assets. Her house went on the market, and I couldn't resist the opportunity. I attended the auction and purchased her lot for far below market value. The other bidders, all local residents who knew the story, seemed happy to let me have it. With Denise's lot in my possession, I applied for a variance to expand my property line. The city, perhaps feeling guilty about how their seal had been forged in the attempted fraud, approved it quickly. I also successfully petitioned to acquire a strip of unused HOA greenbelt that bordered my new property, arguing that the HOA had lost credibility in managing common areas. Now I own nearly a full acre in a neighborhood where most lots are a quarter of that size. My pool area has been expanded into a full outdoor entertainment space with a deck that extends onto what used to be Denise's prized garden. The irony isn't lost on me or anyone else in the neighborhood. The new HOA board, chastened by the experience, has adopted strict oversight measures and transparent policies. They even formally apologized to all homeowners for the previous administration's actions. As for Denise, after her release from prison, she moved to a different town entirely. Word got around that she tried to join the HOA board at her new condo complex, but they politely declined her application. Apparently, a simple Google search of her name brings up dozens of news articles about the Cedar Hollow scandal. I still swim laps in my pool every morning, now with an even better view thanks to my expanded property. Sometimes I think about that first morning when Denise showed up with her clipboard, convinced she could bully me into giving up my private property. She never imagined that her petty power trip would end with me owning her house and her serving 2 years in prison.